So this is the last video in the virtue ethics series. So here's some objections to virtue ethics. I used to do two separate lectures, one on objections and one on answers, but I didn't do that to the other one, so I'll probably sneak in some answers to these objections as they go along. But the first objection is that virtue ethics can't provide any action or any guidance for acting morally, which is the point of a moral theory, right? It's supposed to help us do that. So many people believe that virtue ethics is a good supplement for consequentialism or Kantian ethics, but it can't guide action alone. And that's what we want when we have a normative theory. We want it to guide our action. So, for example, a woman wants to know whether it's morally permissible for her to get an abortion. She has to determine if it's cruel or selfish or unjust, or if it's unwise or prudent, or whatever the case it is, given the circumstances. But how can virtue ethics help in this situation? And many people say it can't. You might say that you could look for a virtuous person, a person that you know tends to be virtuous in those kind of ways, and ask what they think. That's what we do in a lot of cases, is that we ask what people think, right? And especially if we know that they're a virtuous person, we get advice from people who we think are good character. So we might just do something simple like that, which we already do. Some people say that virtue ethics ends up endorsing cultural relativism, that different cultures accept and promote different virtues. And if virtue ethics just ends up saying that one should do what is virtuous, then people will only live up to the virtues of their own culture, which is problematic for a lot of reasons that we have discussed elsewhere in the class. It seems that in this case, maybe the objection could be answered in that if it does, it doesn't do so any more than any other way that any of the other theories do either. Different cultures have different conceptions of virtues, but they also have different conceptions of happiness, which affects consequentialism. And different cultures hold different conceptions of the rules of conduct, which affects Kantian ethics. So this is really more of a question of meta-ethics, and adoption of natural law theory goes beyond culture. And so maybe if natural law theory, or not natural law theory, but moral naturalism is right, then that is saying that virtues are more than just culturally determined. So that could be a way to address that objection. Another objection is that virtues often conflict. Honesty demands that we tell the truth when a spouse says, "Do you like my haircut?" But charity maybe demands that we are sensitive to other people's feelings. The fact that things conflict would be a same objection that we would make to Kantians, and Kantians seek to deny conflicts, but virtue ethicists do leave room, like Aristotle did, for just bad luck, for sometimes that you're in irresolvable conflicts because of the situation and things like that. And it's not clear that the example that I gave, is actually conflicting virtues, right? Honesty is more than truth-telling. Having phronesis means you might say to a friend, "Hey, you know what? That dress is not as flattering as another dress," because you care about your friend and or spouse or significant other, and you know that they don't want to look silly or ridiculous or something like that, and so you could tell them something like that. Another objection to virtue ethics is that virtue ethics can't justify its choice of virtues and vices, but yet if you pair virtue ethics with some kind of sense of moral naturalism or natural law theory, it seems like you could address that problem too. And then lastly, if flourishing determines the virtues and vices, then some believe that this means that virtue ethics is just egoism, which we haven't talked about yet, but is just satisfying your own desires. But really what people say about eudaimonia and flourishing and that kind of stuff is just that those are what kind of help us pick out the virtues. They're the ones that generally make for a good life. They're not they're not the motivations for acting. We don't act so that we can be happy. We don't act on the virtues. We act on the virtues because we possess those virtues, because that's part of our character. And so we act for reasons of, that would be dishonest, I won't do that, and that kind of thing. So anyway, those are some objections and kind of some responses to the objections, but you get what I'm going at there. That is our introduction to virtue ethics. I hope you enjoyed it. That's my favorite theory to go on, but it doesn't have to be yours.